All right, I want to start off today by doing something we have, as usual, let lax way too long.
It's one reason I personally kept putting this off, because I feel bad making you guys sit through it, but people deserve to have their names read. Either get at this chapter or get at reading a list of names.
Yeah, we got a list of names. We have a long list of names. So I am starting with John Jewers and August 11th. I don't know if that's... All right, so to all of our Patreons who we have not thanked in nearly enough time, this is going to be a very long list. I want to say thank you to everybody, especially in these tough times where working from home is
you guys
nom
are
du jour. Yeah.
our saviors and security. You've been definitely hanging out in Discord a little more, if only because there isn't too much else to do. But there's a lot going on here. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening to this very long list of all the people who have supported us.
And please, don't just listen for your name, but listen to all of these wonderful people. All right, starting in August 11th, John Jewers pledged. Alicia Jaromon? No, Yaromin.
One of those.
Jaromin. One of those. Jason Denzel and Dragonmount. That's really exciting to be supported by Dragonmount.
Thanks,
That's
Dragonmount.
Awesome little... Yeah, thanks, Dragonmount. And thanks, Jason. You're a guest, a gentleman, and a scholar. Wallery pledged. Michael S. Power. Chad Spare of Time Trent. Mido 128. Grace Chrysler. PBR Fan 518. Somebody likes some shitty yellow beer, but I appreciate it. Shelley. Taylor Smart. Nikki Caro. Wolf in the Woods. Rudger Swartz. Valinorian.
I think you got it.
Triple Double Russ Zero. I wanted to say that's a reference to something, but I don't know what. Isn't a triple double a thing in like basketball? Yeah. Clearly not sports fans here. Patrick Kyle. Alyssa Moskwa. Rosemary B. Mozine. It's like enzyme, but Mozyme. I'm going to go with Mozyme. Seth London. Excellent name, Seth. Wolfgang von Hofmeister.
What a nice name.
Fun. And David Eads. And that takes us through August.
All right. We'll move on to September here. I have Stephen D. Kane, Karen Case, Gabor Gerst. Wolfgang up their pledge from the month before. Thank you. Sarah Braidtugger G. Anil Chiruvalu upped their pledge. Julian Rouliard, or Roulard. We're doing our best. It probably isn't very good, but, we do our best. Kyle F. Alex Weltlinger. An upped pledge from Anya Franzen. Keith William Randall. The Red Crawler, with a K. Laura Lanier, or Lanier. Simulated Aeon. Thanks, Simulated Aeon. Andy Nogar. An upped pledge from Nathaniel Friday. Kaminara. Penny P. Randland itself is sending us money. Liz Pittman. Thank you, Liz. An upped pledge from Annalise Amaro. I may have skipped Just Plain Matthew. I think I got to Sharon Ramsey. Gil Winters. And Julie Fair. Thank you all very much, patrons from September. Or presumably still ongoing.
And Jackson Tappet, I think. Okay. And then October. An up pledge by Shane Warren. Andy Gall. Laura Braddock Williams. Mark Eastwood. Orham 2. An upped pledge by Anna Michaels.
Thanks, Anna.
Oh, is that Anna?
I think so. I think that's
okay.
her last name.
I should know that. Allison Hope. Thank you, Allison. Sarah Kratke. Thank you. Up pledge from Brett Ziegler. Remember that name. The Dome.
The Dome.
The Dome.
I like the menacing names, guys.
Heather Reed pledged. Gordon Richter, the Eyeless.
Thanks, Gordon.
Pledged. Thank you, Gordon. Ram Rangaswamy.
I'm nodding to that.
Okay. Paradigm Flex Emporium. Peter Zarglis. An upped pledge from Julia Fair. Aaron Singh. And that takes us through October.
An upped pledge from Jess Waltman. Erin Martin Elston, Blue Balsamon, Kate Fertney, Marta Orozco, Christopher Rubach, Henry Blazer, Katie Hickok, Zachary M., Willie Anderson, Sam Barnett, Michael Taylor, Aes Sedai Serenity. Good name. I like it when people get creative. Not that there's anything wrong with your real name, folks. Daniel...
Well, there's something wrong with your real name, but everyone else is fine.
Mine's impossible to read aloud, I know. No one ever gets it. Very rare.
Cooler, Hylar.
There's
What's that?
every once in a while someone who like studied Dutch in college gets it.
Dude, I think I knew you for years before I got it right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I remember, was it when I was doing the intro for the podcast, I told Jessica to do Seth Jacobson and Patrick Hewler. And you're like, no, it's Hylar. And I was like, I'm an idiot.
Where did I leave off here? Daniel Macaro. There's a lot more consonants going on there, but I think it's Macaro.
Yeah.
CRM201. Thank you, CRM201. Daniel Lavecchio. Nadia Atley.
Melissa Taylor upped her pledge.
Thank you, Melissa Taylor. Dalinar the Dog in Black. A pledge from Christine Rice. Thanks, Christine. What's up?
Nadia's Deviko in Discord.
Oh.
Hi, Deviko. She's here now. I always like it when
Thanks.
people here when we get to thank them in person.
I like it when they're actually here, yeah. And finally, Pete Christensen for November.
And by the way, we really, I just want to say, like, people up their pledge and drop it and up it again. We really appreciate it. Like, give whatever you can. If you can't give, that's totally fine. We totally understand if you have to either drop a pledge or
sometimes people message me and like apologize. And first of all, I'm not watching that hard. I'm like, oh, that's really so and so down their pledge by $1 this month. No. And me and Seth get it. We're regular working Joes, and sometimes that $5, $10, $20 can actually make a difference at the end of our month.
Well, and it's all about, like, I go in and some months I need to just cut down on all my $5, $10 donations to Netflix and Patreon and everything else. And, like, all that together can save me a couple $100 in a month, and, like...
Sometimes I pay my rent and utilities.
Sometimes I gotta do it.
Sorry, New York Times. Like, if that bounces, like, you're gonna have to eat it. I'll get you back, man. Electricity comes first.
And so December... we have Elon, $2. Thanks. Are you Elon Musk? Just checking in. If so, maybe a little more than $2. If not, $2 is fine.
Just said they could pledge whatever they want.
Yeah, but it's Elon. If it's Musk, I'm telling you, he's got more than $2. Anyway,
throw in a Tesla.
How
we'll share it. We're simple men.
Lucas
Semietkowski? Lucas
Semietkowski. That's what I'm going with. Cheryl Young, Becky Herman, Sharon Ramsey upped her pledge, Megan Rolfs, Alina Fischel, Tom.
Just Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Evan Mac Mildeby upped his pledge quite a bit. Thank you, Evan.
He's been around forever.
He's been around forever, yeah. So I think he's one of those folks who may have gone up and down with the times, but we really appreciate your support. Jonas Bergmeister, Josh Offsey, and Alexander Schnardfelt. He says Starfield in parentheses after that. Interesting. I wonder if that's the right way to pronounce it.
I bet that's how you pronounce it in whichever Northern European language has umlauts over an A and a J after a T.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It probably does.
Well, thank you for that pledge. And John Hunt, who's been a long-time supporter, upped his pledge. So thank you, John. And that takes us through 2019.
January. I have got... Wow, a lot of stuff happened in January. Oh, wow. A lot more happened in, like, the first day. January.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of New Year pledges. We appreciate that.
Frederick Hurley. Luke... Doing my best. Luke Riedisel. Oh, man. We must sound so awkward. Sorry, guys.
You know, I think the fun part of listening to us read these names is listening to us butcher them.
Yes.
Because otherwise...
Feel free to gather around and make fun of us while we butcher your names. Sorry.
The American education system sucks.
Erin Herring, Benjamin Barnhart, Holly T., Frank Sorshak, Kayla Johnson, John Onate, Hugo Graca, an upped pledge from Zach Ingram, Corey Aaron Barnes, upped pledge from Mr. Anzavino.
I gotta say thank you, Matt. You rock.
Upped pledge from Seth London, whose name we already read in this. Just Luke, Stephanie Fagan, an upped pledge from the name speaker herself, Shanus Tom, Michael Norton, Pat Doherty, upped pledge from Derek McDowell, Aaron Townley, Emmy Dibdall. Shanus Tom is popping up again. I already read that name, though. Thank you if that was a multi-pledge or something. Kyle Strano, JP, Rob Baird, Zenker.
Zenshir? Kier?
Yeah, I assume these are like internet handles that are probably hard to pronounce anyway, or abbreviations of things, you know? When I see something like that, it could just be a surname, too, maybe. Levi Midcap?
Can I just say, I think a lot of Robert Jordan's names are basically internet handles. Because what he used to do was just go around and, like, take a name and rearrange the letters until he came up with something that looked good. But he never tried to pronounce them, which is part of why there are no official pronunciations. That's why Graendal and Asmodean are both equally valid names, because Jordan never conceptually came up with a pronunciation. He came up with a spelling and then put that out there.
Yeah, I was really surprised to learn that I think it was when we spoke with Michael and Kate Redding. I should just say Michael and Kate. Who did the Watt audiobooks, that they would sometimes get, when they first started, they would reach out to RJ and be like, how do you want us to pronounce this? And he was like, use your judgment, do your best. Was what he said, basically. Okay. And that's that's what we use as canon for the pronunciations, is the audiobooks. It's the most official thing that they're, you know.
Some people pick the glossary out, and I'm no good. When people say, oh, it's this, and there's like a pronunciation in the glossary, I still also have trouble well, I'm not really sure how that's pronounced.
Oh, even the pronunciation keys.
Weird, supposedly pronunciation keys aren't always clear to me.
And last but not least, another upped pledge at the end of January from our friend Christine.
Christine has done an awful lot to support us, the podcast, both financially and with work. We really appreciate everything she's done. There's been quite a bit that's gone into her support of this podcast above and beyond her donations, which are also highly, highly appreciated.
Including but not limited to cookies.
I love cookies. All right, February. Derek Lawrence, Jen Lauren, Ryan McBride. I feel like I've seen that name before. Timu Sari. That's a really cool name. Both a double E in the first name and a double A in the second. Jesse Schultz, Carlos McIntosh, Michelle Grant, Alan Derugama. That almost sounds like a Wheel of Time name.
Kinda.
Oh, hey, Carlos. Carlos is here in Discord. Jared Amberique. Thank you, Jared. Carlos. Oh, okay, I gotta go back to Carlos. That's an odd amount to pledge. Was there a reason why you picked that number in particular? It's just not a round number.
Whenever I see that, I always assume it's like some conversion. Like they gave us euros, or, you know. They're actually there, though, so I don't know why I'm answering of what I suspect.
No, that makes sense. No. He just
wanted.
He just gave that amount to be more interesting. Well, it worked. It stuck out, and now I'm talking to you about it. I love little details like that. Obviously, I love little details, in case you haven't listened to the podcast. Jared Amberique. Gerard, great pledge, thank you. Jana, thank you. Andrew J. Sherry, wonderful. Brian Corden, thank you. Dylan Shindelar, I like that last name. Ian Wafer. Hamish Kumbi. Aura, I like that name. Nice and short. Kaylee Help me with this one.
Arafenwile?
Kaylee Arafenwile. Chuck Stroop. Chris Grady. Gwen Prince. Old Hoot. Great name, great pledge. Thank you, Old Hoot. Kristen Sergenstrom. And once again, Christine Rice. Like I said, she's been sort of...
She's just
on the last day of the month.
It's literally the 29th.
It's just been stepping it up every time. Thank you. Finally, we are at our current month.
And I have here Abigail Sancto, a Just Paul, an upped pledge from Jackson Trappett. Definitely recognize that name over time. Todd Davis, Kevin Angus, Mike Batzel, Samuel James Thomas 92. Thank you, sir. Upped pledge from Kirsten Segerstrom.
Oh, and Kevin Angus is here with us. Hi, Kevin.
What's up, Kevin?
And Wind Blows Over the Wall is Mike.
Bryn Fettel, Daniel Mickenville, an upped pledge from Levi Midcap, and Chris Mackey, just yesterday. I think we actually got it all.
Wow, we made it.
We did it!
Thank you.
We really should do that like every week that we sit down, probably, but...
Oh, Narishma, that's Chris McCackey.
Chris Mackey.
Mackie. Oh, I added an extra syllable in there.
Thanks, Chris. Good name. I'm going to secretly chuckle at its possible double meaning.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick.
Yeah, let's dig into Chapter 48.
All right. Leavetakings. And our symbol is the White Cloak Sunburst.
I assume that's for Galad.
Yeah, I think he's the only White Cloak that actually shows up. Oh, there's maybe one or two at the end of this chapter, too, but...
Yeah, there's a group he talks to, but...
Galad gets to be highlighted as a badass in this one.
That's, yes. I think we get our answer for whether or not he would win against Uno.
Yeah, 1-on-2. I just like Uno better.
Oh, we all like Uno better. But, Galad's the perfectionist in the corner who raises his hand every time the teacher asks a question and always has the right answer. Yeah, he's smart. We get it. We don't like him, but he's probably right. Yeah, Hermione with the sword. No, totally. I mean, I do like Galad. There's some common sense missing there, but, I mean, who among us is not missing some common sense?
Once she was back in the wagon, Nynaeve changed into a decent dress, with a few exasperated mutters for having to undo one set of buttons and do up another by herself. The plain gray wool, fine and well cut, yet hardly elaborate, would pass without comment almost anywhere, but it was decidedly warmer. Still, it felt good to be decently garbed again, and somehow odd, as if she were wearing too many clothes. It must be the heat. Quickly, she knelt in front of the small brick stove with its tin chimney, and opened the iron door on their valuables. The twisted stone ring was fast nestled into her belt pouch, beside Lan's heavy signet ring, and her gold great serpent. The small gilded coffer containing the gems Amathera had given her went into the leather scrip, with the pouches of herbs taken from Rond Makura in Martichin, and the small mortar and pestle for preparing them. She fingered through the latter, just to remind herself what each contained. From Hulal to that dreadful fork root, the letters of rites went in as well. And 3 of the 6 purses, not quite as fat as it had been after paying the menagerie's way to Gildan. Luca might not be interested in his 100 marks, but he had no qualms about collecting his expenses. One of the letters authorizing the bearer to do whatever she wished in the name of the Amerlin seat joined the rings. No more than vague rumors of some sort of trouble in Tar Valon had reached Samara. She might find a use for it, even with Swan Sanche's signature. The dark wooden box she left where it sat, next to 3 of the purses, as well as the rough jute bag containing the Adam. That she certainly had no wish to touch. And the silver arrow Elaine had found the night of the calamitous encounter with Moghedien. For a moment, she frowned at the arrow, contemplating Moghedien. It was best to do whatever was necessary to avoid her. It was. I bested her once, and had been hung up like a sausage in a kitchen the second time. If not for Brigida, she made her own choice. The woman had said so, and it was true. I could defeat her again. I could. But if she failed... She was only trying to avoid the wash leather purse stuffed right to the back, and she knew it. Yet there was not a hair's difference for ugliness between the purse and the thought of losing to Moghedien again. Drawing a deep breath, she gingerly reached in and took it up by the drawstrings, and knew she had been wrong. Evil seemed to bathe her hand, stronger than ever, as if the Dark One really was trying to break through the Quendiar seal. Inside, better to dwell all day on defeat by Moghedien. There was a world of difference between thought and reality. It had to be imagination. There had been no such feeling in Tanchico, but she wished she could let Elaine carry that too, or leave it there. Stop being foolish, she told herself firmly. It holds the Dark One's prison shut. You were just letting your fancies run wild. But she still dropped it like a weak dead rat onto the red dress Luca had made, then wrapped and tied the thing securely with more than a little haste. The silken parcel went into the middle of a bundle of clothes she was taking with her, inside her good gray traveling cloak. A few inches distance was enough to take away the sensation of dark bleakness, but she still wanted to wash her hand. If only she did not know it was there. She was being foolish. Elaine would laugh at her, and Brigida as well, and rightly.
All right, it's a lot of cool stuff. So it's a list of Nynaeve's possessions, and I kind of want to talk about a fair number of them, not all of them, but a decent number of them.
She's got quite a collection of, important things at this point. You don't really think about it much. She's been acquiring all this stuff during their travels.
Yeah, and she doesn't even have the paralysis net yet.
Yeah.
First of all, start off with, it was odd wearing so many clothes. Okay, Nynaeve. She's gotten used to wearing, frilly dresses, and now she's like, ugh, must be the heat. It's weird putting on this heavy woolen dress. It's like, no, you just got used to wearing, light silks that show a lot of your skin.
And it's hot as heck out there. Wool is not always good.
Nope. The stone ring, and she leaves the dark wooden box for Elaine, because that has the 2 ter'angreal that will get you to Tel'aran'rhiod if you're channeling. But, of course, she wants the one that gets you there when you're not channeling, so she doesn't have to be angry when she goes to sleep.
Yeah.
So they both have access to the world of dreams, but of course, the twisted ring is the more coveted way to get there. So Elaine shoots her a nasty look when she's like, "You left me those."
Yeah, I did kind of wonder if Nynaeve is trying to control Elaine a little, or control her visits to Tel'aran'rhiod a bit. I'm not sure. Yeah, fair enough. They're just not as good.
Yeah, just because you have to be able to channel. I always thought, I assume that she takes the twisted ring so she doesn't have to, so she can use it when she's not angry, basically, since she still has that block. And then she also, I noticed, leaves half the money for Elaine instead of taking all the money. So it's like, I feel like that's very much like drawing a line down a room and being like, this is my half and this is your half. And things have gotten bad when you get to that point when you're like, okay, we can't share, so we're going to split it up, and you can do whatever you want with your money, and I'm going to do whatever I want with my money, and consequences be damned.
Things are getting tense, have been getting tense for quite some time, and get more tense in the short future.
And this is, I think, some of the frustration that people have is like, why does he have to write all this tension between people? But it's like, it humanizes all of these characters so much to have them who has not been on a road trip with someone they love, a family member, and wanted to strangle that little...
On the 9th day, locked in a little car with them, and then the air conditioner breaks, you might kill him.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
Yeah, totally. And not to mention they're being hunted by one of the Forsaken. So let's elevate that tension just a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad that it's come up in a lot of our conversations about Nynaeve in recent episodes, that, and not just Nynaeve, but all of them are under threat all the time, and that changes your behavior as well, not just being locked in a hot box with them as well. I feel like Nynaeve in particular has been on the blunt end of a lot of really scary situations, and she's always been a little heated, but that's all that stuff mounted up is not going to help.
She's got to be on a hair trigger.
Yeah.
And knowing that she has to get angry, she's got constantly got to be thinking about on the verge of being pissed off.
She's constantly thinking about how she almost died here and was attacked there and how dangerous everything is all the time. And it is. I mean, she's right, but that doesn't make it any easier on your mind. The only other thing I would have pointed out from the readout is that the Dark One's touch is obviously really heavy on the world right now. The weather's changing. It's getting hotter and hotter.
Totally.
And the bit with the seal, when Nynaeve picks it up, I felt is meant to even just demonstrate that harder.
So for me, I can't help but think of the Dark One breaking the seals the way Rand is breaking out of the box. That, because these are the focus points for the shield, right? These are the 7 seals, the 7 focus points. Just like a shield on someone's channeling ability has those little knots.
Right.
And so when Rand is trying to break through the tied-off knots, which obviously these have to be tied off, he's putting that little thread of Sidene through the knot, and he works on them one at a time and then breaks them.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's going on is the Dark One is essentially using the true power to thread through the various knots in his shield. He's already broken 3, and now when they feel this evil, what they're actually feeling is the Dark One threading his Sidene through that knot, because Rand says, I have to work fast, or they'll feel it and stop me. Well, that's what the Dark One's doing. And remember, each knot goes faster, so that would explain why the first...
I totally agree. That's a good way to put it.
Sure, the first one took forever, took 3 millennia to break, but then they keep getting faster and faster and faster.
I'm nodding. I always imagined it that way, too, like the Dark One pushing up. or, maybe not up is the appropriate way to say it, or however you want to.
And I think he started trying to break free the moment he was sealed away, but it just took him 3,000 years to break the first.
And after that, it's easier.
And then after that, it's easier. Yep.
I also always kind of imagined, and I don't know if this is 100% true, I think Moraine might have talked about it at some point, but that as each one breaks, it frees more. The Dark One has more play in maybe a similar way to how a shield might work. If you can break through a part of it, then you can start pulling it apart. Or you're a little more free. You have a little more freedom of movement.
So yeah, I think that was my theory on why they can feel the evil in it now when they couldn't before. And we also know that this is the next seal that breaks, right? When they deliver it to Saladar, it is broken.
Oh, that's right.
And it's the only other seal that breaks before the last battle, because 3 are broken. This one breaks when they deliver it, and then there are 3 left for the last battle. Which does throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into my thing, because if he was getting faster with each one, he would have been able to break through the last 3, probably before the last battle, but,
Yeah, well, perhaps.
But they are ready to break, so maybe he's like... I wonder if maybe the Dark One, by making them fragile, that was essentially him getting in there and breaking the seal, but the physical breaking. I don't know. Why were those last 3 fragile and unbroken? What actually breaks them? Because, they get fragile for a while. And then the other question, when Moraine shaves a piece off of the seal, does that cause an issue?
I don't know. I've had similar thoughts, because the final 3 are soft later, and we see this happen with all the seals. But what if you just kept it together? Does that count? It's a silly thought, but
no. It's like putting broken pottery back together. Yeah, really.
Or what if one's got a chip out of it? Does it still work? I would think so.
I think of it maybe like a support beam, where you can drill a hole in a support beam and the house isn't going to collapse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. And then, once she's not touching it, she wraps it in her silky dress. Again, she wraps it. We see her take a lot of precautions. It's inside a silk dress, inside a wool dress, and then packed away in a chest. This thing is actually fairly well protected, and it still comes out broken.
Yeah, that's a good point. Shortly after that, we see the description of all the items of power. Terangriel, I don't think we need to go too into it. They have 3 Dream Terangriel. We spend a lot of time in Nynaeve's head. I'm going to skip over some of this.
Yeah. Some typical thinking about Elaine as someone who wants a lot of money. Oh, she thought she heard a scream only minutes before Elaine arrived. Remember that was Elaine telling Brigida she was a queen, and Brigida just flat out didn't believe her.
Oh,
that was,
yeah.
Like, the last straw for Elaine, and so Elaine like threw back her head and screamed. That's what she's referencing there. I was like, she heard screaming. I had to go back and figure out what that was, because I was like, who was screaming? It's like, oh, Elaine. In frustration.
Brigida finds out that Elaine wasn't making it up in, I think it's 49. Not this one, the next one. A lot of the folks in the menagerie that they've become friends with walk up and say goodbye here. A group of men offer to escort them to their boat, and the women say, thank you, but no, you should just get out of here. And they all appear relieved.
Yeah, we get a few references. We get like Eludra giving away matches. So again, just like kind of seeing Eludra's progress as she's working on her cannon making skills in the background, which is one of my favorite side B, C, D plots, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Littell, who's like, get the fuck out, bye. Littell is my favorite, like, anti-Nynaeve, because she, like, mirrors Nynaeve in a lot of ways. And obviously, she ends up married to Luca. And so I kind of really like the way Nynaeve views Littell is how I think Nynaeve would view herself if she, like, met herself.
Oh, I think so, yeah. Kind of explains a lot how they ended up fighting, like, as soon as they said some words to each other.
Luca gives her some flowers, which she is like, Lan never gave me any flowers.
I definitely highlighted that. That jerk, he gave me flowers, but Lan never gave me any flowers either. She's just angry at everyone.
Oh, and I also like how she says, and when he's like standing there flattering her, she had to stand there and just listen, holding the flowers. It's like, Nynaeve, you just had to listen to that flattery. Couldn't walk away from it.
I still can't tell if she's into it and doesn't understand that she likes it, or if she really doesn't like it, or what is happening there, or if she's just knows that she can be a jerk, and I don't know.
I think it's, she's in love with Lan and would never betray him, but she's very flattered by the attention.
I could settle it there. It's maybe a little awkward when someone that you're very attracted to hits on you and you're not going to do anything about it, but it's still nice to hear. Just a little affirming. Yeah, I am attractive.
I never get tired of people telling me I'm pretty.
At
least I don't think I would.
I don't think most people do.
I also like the line where she sees that the men are carrying their own pots, and she's like, fine, they can do the cooking. And everyone's like, whoo! Because Nynaeve's a terrible cook.
I'm sure Uno will do a much better job.
Uh-huh. A question, Brigida was muttering something about Carpin girls. I was wondering if you knew what that was a reference to, or if that's just one of the many Brigida references to a long-dead, forgotten civilization that no one's ever heard of and is never mentioned again.
Yeah, I think it's a throwaway. Wait, is it one of the times when she's scolding Elaine and Nynaeve for fighting? She calls them, like, you're behaving like a bunch of so-and-sos. And
exactly.
Yeah, we never really know what it means, but it's implied. You don't really need to know.
Brigida has a habit of referencing experiences in her early lives, most of which are mentioned once and are probably from earlier ages. And there's a whole list of them here. As Nynaeve rushes off out of the rest, Brigida mutters about Carpin girls leaping from a river cliff. Yep. Thank you, Watt Encyclopedia. You're wonderful. Yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. There's a list of 17 on the Wikipedia page. I'm sure counting online is riveting radio.
Well, at this point is when they head toward Samara on foot now. I have a bunch to read there.
Yeah, I was going to say, and this is where I pretty much stopped taking notes because I assumed you were going to read most of it.
Yeah, it's like 2 pages, but it's worth it. And it's Scalad's shining moment. I don't think he has another for a while.
Like, this is some of the most badass fighters we have encountered in a group. Probably, the biggest, other than maybe the Aiel.
Yeah.
But, like, Borderlanders, born and raised, Galad, who impresses the hell out of them, Tom, who, Tom. It's like Julian is like
Julian's pretty up there too. And they're all flanking the, well, not Aes Sedai, but channelers.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think Elaine and Nynaeve are more powerful than most Aes Sedai.
I think so.
They're certainly more dangerous, because they're not limited with the use of the power by the Three Oaths.
Yeah. However, even as I read this, it may even be in the text. I can't remember if I put that part in. But Elaine and Nynaeve, they do embrace the Source, but I don't think they channel at all. They're both afraid to. They're afraid that they'll be tracked by Moghedien if they channel here and now. They know Moghedien knows they're somewhere around here, so best not light a beacon.
They know they're heading into a war zone because there's been a huge battle between essentially the Prophet's people and the White Cloaks, and riots by the general population, and there are roving bands of warriors attacking each other in the city. And it's like there's people's heads on pitchforks just lining the street. Like, this has been French Revolution style blood running in the streets.
That's part of the reason I wanted to read so much of it, because it's really visceral.
And I think the Prophet's men are attacking the White Cloaks, who are soldiers, and they're just getting cut down. And that's why there's so much death. And then the civilians are getting attacked by the Prophet's people and just torn apart. So it's just like this, the crazy, crazy religious fanaticism is what's leading to this.
And the fanatics go after, like, everyone? So I kind of wondered, as you see, like, random civilians dead or hanging, or, like, people who were clearly executed, I wondered if that was also, like, were these people who were like, this Prophet's an idiot or whatever last week, and now this happened, If that's part of it as well. It almost seems more like a general riot than a battle, although maybe those two things are a little hard to separate. I'll read to you about it. Then,
Yay.
They reached Samara, and she began to wish she had accepted Petra's offer, and the Chivanas, and anyone else's she could have found. The gates stood open and unguarded, and 6 black columns of smoke rose above the gray town walls. The streets beyond were still. Shattered glass from broken windows crunched underfoot. That was the only sound except for a distant buzz, like a monstrous swarm of wasps scattered through the city. Furniture and bits of clothing littered the paving stones. Pots and pottery, things dragged from shops and homes, whether by looters or by people fleeing. There was no way to tell. Not only property had been destroyed. In one place, a corpse in a fine green silk coat hung half out of a window, limp and unmoving. In another, a fellow garbed in rags dangled by his neck from the eaves of a tinsmith shop. Sometimes, down a side street or alley, she caught a glimpse of what might have been discarded bundles of old clothes. She knew they were not. In one doorway, where the splintered door hung crazily by a single hinge, small flames licked up around a wooden staircase, smoke just beginning to trickle out. The street might be empty now, but whoever had done that was not long gone. Head swiveling, trying to watch every way at once, Nynaeve took a firm hold on her belt knife. Sometimes the angry buzz grew louder, a wordless guttural roar of rage that seemed no more than 1 street over, and sometimes it faded to a dull murmur. Yet when trouble came, it came suddenly and silently. The mass of men stalked around the next corner, but one, like a pack of hunting wolves, jamming the street from side to side, soundless but for the thud of boots. The sight of Nynaeve and the others was a torch tossed into a haystack. There was no hesitation. As one, they surged forward, howling and rabid, waving pitchforks and swords, axes and clubs, anything that could be taken to hand for a weapon. Enough anger still clung in Nynaeve for her to embrace Saidar, and she did it without thinking, even before she saw the glow spring up around Elaine. There were a dozen ways she could halt this mob by herself, a dozen more she could destroy it if she chose, if not for the possibility of Moghedien. She was not sure whether the same thought held Elaine. She only knew that she hung on to her anger, and the true source with equal fervor, and it was Moghedien more than the onrushing rabble that made it hard. She hung on to them, and knew she dared do nothing, not if there was any other chance. Almost, she wished she could cut the flows being woven by Elaine. There had to be some other chance. One man, a tall fellow in a ragged red coat that had belonged to someone else once by its green and gold embroidery, ran out in front of the others on long legs, shaking a wood axe overhead. Brigida's arrow took him through one eye. He went down in a sprawling heap and was trampled by the others, all contorted faces and wordless screams. Nothing was going to stop them. With a wail, half outrage, half pure fear, Nynaeve jerked her belt knife free and at the same time prepared to channel. Like a wave striking boulders, the charge splintered on Shienaran's steel. The top-knotted men, not much less ragged than those they fought, worked their two-handed swords methodically, craftsmen at their craft, and the onslaught went no further than their thin line. Men fell screaming for the prophet, but more scrambled over them. Julian, the fool, was in that row. Flat-topped conical cap perched on his dark head, thin staff a blur that deflected stabs, broke arms, and cracked skulls. Tom worked behind the line, his limbs strong as he darted from place to place to confront the few who managed to wiggle through. Only a dagger in either hand, yet even swordsmen died on those blades. The gleeman's leathery face was grim, but when one bulky fellow in a blacksmith's leather vest nearly reached Elaine with his pitchfork, Tom snarled as viciously as any in the mob, and very nearly cut the man's head off while slitting his throat. Through it all, Brigida calmly shifted from spot to spot, every arrow finding an eye. Yet if they held the mob, it was Gallad who broke them. He faced their charge as though awaiting the next dance at a ball, arms folded and unconcerned, not even bothering to bare his blade until they were almost on top of him. Then he did dance. All his grace turned in an instant to fluid death. He did not stand against them. He carved a path into their heart, a clear swath as wide as his sword's reach. Sometimes 5 or 6 men closed in around him with swords and axes, and table legs for clubs, but only for the brief time it took for them to die. In the end, all their rage, all their thirst for blood, could not face him. It was from him that the first ran, flinging away weapons, and when the rest fled, they divided around him, as they vanished back the way they had come. He stood 20 paces from anyone else, alone among the dead and the groans of the dying. Nynaeve shivered as he bent to clean his blade on a corpse's coat. He was graceful, even doing that. He was beautiful, even doing that. She thought she might sick up. Just wanted to darken your day, guys. Oh, brutal. Like, God, he's beautiful. I think I'm going to puke. So it was a good kind of bizarre contrast at the end there that I appreciated.
Yeah, almost as gross as when Brigida recovers her arrows.
Oh.
Because if you remember, every arrow found an eye. And so she is yanking each arrow out of a skull.
I never really thought about it, because it just seems like a super badass thing to do, you know? But that might probably save the arrow.
Well, and she's very particular about her arrows.
If you shoot an arrow through a rib cage of an animal, the arrow's probably, you're never going to use that to hunt again. You could save parts of it, but they'll break or bend or just become imperfect because they're slammed into bone, you know?
Yeah, so do you not think that her arrows would work again?
Oh, no, I mean, if they never struck bone, like if they went straight through an eye, maybe the brain would slow it down enough to not damage the arrow, is what I'm thinking. Oh, this is kind of hard to say out loud. In the same way, like, you don't shoot your nicest hunting arrows at a tree for target practice because they're worth like $20 a piece, and you just ruin $20. You just flush it down the toilet. You don't practice with good arrows.
Sorry, Timber's eating right now, so I'm kind of waiting for him to stop making food noises. Of course, I put the food down like 2 hours ago. You know, he's just deciding to wait until I start recording to eat. Do you think the arrow would hit the back of this? Do you think it would like go through the eye, through the brain, and hit the back of the inside of the skull?
Depends on the distance and the bow, you know.
I mean, real close. Brigida's right up in him.
She's also, you know, the best shot ever, so she could probably account for that. Something that's way beyond any kind of skill level I've ever seen, but...
You think she's using, like, just enough force to, like...
She's a hero of the horn, so why not, you know?
Right.
I've seen people do cool tricks like at shows and festivals, or there's some old guys and gals out there who can like shoot 2 targets at once with 2 arrows at the same time and do all the fun trick shots. Oh, good question, Kirsten. I don't think Brigida ever does use a Two Rivers longbow.
I honestly don't think she has the strength to draw it, just in general, because they talk about like the only way you can be strong enough to draw it is to train from birth. They're a very different kind of bow. The longbow versus what Brigida's using.
Yeah, it's like a...
Because she's much more of like a recurve type.
Medieval equivalent of a hand cannon. Yeah, I'm going to go with that, Super Skylake. That if she wanted to, she could. It just never came up. Because she's a hero of the horn.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing. I'm not saying she couldn't fire the bow. I'm just saying I think she'd look at it and be like, why would I use that club? I have this bow over here. Like,
yeah.
That's too, to be able to draw and shoot it accurately, I think she'd be like, it's just too much. It's like, why would I fire a cannon when I have a gun?
Yeah. And you do have to train your whole life to get good with, to be able to use a weapon like that. I know I've brought this up on the podcast before, but modern scientists or anthropologists or whoever's studying this can tell the difference between archers in a certain place and the infantry in a certain place, because the archers have bone issues from doing this over and over their whole lives, with like spurs in their shoulder and things.
So here's a question. Is Brigida's body, which is it the one she got for being Brigida? Is like, does she have that kind of training built in?
I would think so, because she's born as an adult,
But is it like one specific life, or is it like an amalgamation of all her different lives?
I don't know. Is that what she thinks she looks like? Is that what she looked like in her first life, or when she became a hero or something?
Yeah, I don't really know.
Because you would think she'd have to probably look different in every tale. Ooh, and Tom brings us up at some point, before we ever meet Brigida, that he thinks that some stories are about her, that like they're by a different name and she looks different, but it seems like it's her.
Mm-hmm. So I think she looks like the Brigida of the name Brigida, right? That like there was that hero who had that look. So in each life she has a different name, different look.
Why does she think she's Brigida?
Yeah, right? Like
she could go by any name or no name.
Right.
Or at what point did she say like, okay, this will be my real name? I don't know. I guess you got to decide at some point. Go by something. Like,
was that her first life? Or was it her most recent? Or was it just one that she happens to remember? Or is it the one with the most stories told about her?
I'm going to say, and I'm just making this up, but I'm going to say you die heroically and you're doing your awesome task. You get, like, moved over to the committee to be accepted to be one of the heroes of the Horn, and you show up and all of the heroes are there and you're just like, what the hell? And they're like, hey man, what's your name? And I'm like, I'm Patrick. And they're like, okay. And that's how everyone knows you now.
Yeah.
Because after that, you just come back and you're talking to the same people, So...
Patrick is one of the heroes of the Horn, right?
Oh yeah. The Irish version of the name.
And then, we have Jane Farstrider as well, who's obviously as a hero, he comes back as his original self. Now, he hasn't been reborn yet. Do you think, like, if he's... and he will be. Do you think if Jane Farstrider is reborn, they'll know him as Farstrider?
Will he be an old guy again?
But no.
Do you come back young even if you die old?
Or when they blow the horn again, will he come back as his new body?
I'm going to say, I don't know. I don't actually know the answers to these things, but I would think you come back
unanswerable. I like asking.
Whatever you had, this is how I would imagine it, but fixed, but top-notch, Like stock model, or whatever your souped-up model is,
Shiny, fresh coat of paint.
Yeah, that's true. I just am kind of head nodding to what Bambi said, that Brigida does seem like one of the older heroes.
Oh, that's a good point. There's only about 100, but there could be...
Jane's fresh. Archer Hawkwing's only been around for not even a full cycle.
Oh, but was that his first... he talks about fighting side by side and against Randall Thor, against Lewis Theron many times. I would assume he'd been reborn a lot before that.
I guess so, yeah.
So, to me, that indicates that he's using... maybe his most famous rebirth.
I'm nodding.
Or it could just depend. I mean, I doubt there's one hard and fast rule, right? I bet they can be, like Teleron Riyadh, it's who you see yourself as.
Yeah, I would think so.
And that can change based on, a lot of stuff.
In the loading program in The Matrix, Neo shows up and he's like wearing a hoodie and a baseball cap or whatever. It's like, this is what
Your
I think I look like.
residual self-image
Yeah.
is the reference. The residual self-image is the term they used in The Matrix.
Yeah, man. How do I get a cool coat like yours, though?
So they keep going. Tom starts reciting the story of Kirukin, and Brigida's like, that bitch. Didn't like her then, still don't like her.
She had a temper like a boar and caught in briars at the best, Brigida said softly to no one in particular.
They encounter this other group of white cloaks, and there's about to be a battle, but Galad steps up and is like, no, these are my folks. This is why you're protecting the boat for these folks, right? Like, yeah.
I did also really enjoy reading how quiet it is after the battle, before and after. It's like silent. And you can kind of hear things in the distance, and Nynaeve has the thought she can hear distant roars. I had the feeling of being watched, but...
That to me feels like a detail from actual battles that Jordan put in. That, like, weird, like, being in a silent area, but knowing that there's, like, battles going on and hearing the distant roar of them.
But word must have spread, or else the Watchers had seen what happened, because they saw no one else living until 24 white cloaks stepped into the street. I guess the feel of it felt very scary and real. The way there's silence, and then out of nothing, chaos, and then it's gone, and silence again. I can, like, imagine the feeling of dread. At any second, it's like being menaced,
And Tom just viciously cutting off a guy's head just because he got close to Elaine. Don't fuck with my daughter. I mean,
He sure acts that way.
He sure does. There's a crowd trying to get on the boat. Refugees basically trying to get away. And in that crowd is someone special.
Neris?
Marigon, a.k.a. Moghedien.
Oh.
Moghedien has taken 2 children off the street, whose parents are probably long dead, and is currently hiding in the refugees. Because I believe somehow she's found out that the girls are going to get on the boat, and she thinks she can get on the boat with them.
That also explains possibly explains the refugee that's missing in the middle of the night in the next chapter.
Uh-huh. We'll talk about that in the next chapter.
Oh, nice.
So my only question, and I couldn't find any evidence for this, but do you think Moghedien in any way influences Nynaeve to take the families on board so she can, or do you think it's just right place, right time? Like, how does Moghedien set it up so that she's among the people who get taken on board? How does she know that Nynaeve's going to take refugees on board? Doesn't seem likely.
No, it doesn't, because it even seems up in the air until the last moment where, like, and even as Nynaeve is like, no, you're going to help all these refugees, and then she immediately thinks, like, but, they're going to pile on the boat, we might never get out of here. She's struggling with it, too. I mean, the captain doesn't want them on the ship at all, but it seems like a thing Nynaeve would do. It doesn't seem out of character. That doesn't mean there isn't some subtle compulsion, as Skylake is suggesting. But with the crying, dirty, starving children and mothers, that's enough to make Nynaeve do just about anything. And maybe Moghedien knew that.
Marigon, a few years older, had been plump once, but her fraying brown dress hung on her loosely now. Her blunt face looked beyond weary. Her 2 sons, 6 and 7, stared silently at the world with 2 big eyes.
Yeah.
She dealt in curses and herbs in Samara, although she had some odd ideas about both, because she's forsaken, and they're probably way out of date. I mean, he kind of sandwiches her between the other 2 to sort of hide her presence.
Mm-hmm.
He gives you a little bit more about the last woman. It's very subtle, it's very good, but I don't think there's anything about Moghedien in particular. But you gotta wonder if Moghedien's not using some compulsion.
Nynaeve knew very well why they touched her the most, too. Each story could have been a reflection of a thread in her own life. But she likes Irina the best, the youngest one.
That was the last one, yeah. Reminds her of herself a lot, or something like that.
Because she doesn't know how to keep her mouth shut. That's why.
Yeah, that's why, basically, yeah. Oh, Nynaeve.
She just says what she thinks. So this is when our group is approaching the dock, and the captain is there, and they're, trying to keep the refugees off the boat. Agni Neris was a tall, bony man in a dark coat, with ears that stood out and a dour cast to his narrow face. He paid no mind.
Jordan really hates people who own boats. He just describes, they're always the weaseliest.
And skinny, narrow-faced dudes are always the evil ones.
Yeah. The dour cast. And we get to see he gets all his shit thrown overboard. It's hilarious. It reminds me of the one, remember when Matt jumps on the ship and there's the sort of the boat captain there hates Aes Sedai and Matt tortures him the whole trip and steals all his food and dices with him and tosses his money overboard. It sort of reminds, I almost thought this was the same character, just a couple of books later.
What, the guy that ran kicks in the chest?
No, that's Florin Gelb.
Oh, this is from the kind of escape from Tar Valon.
Exactly, yeah. Escape from Tar Valon. Matt jumps on the boat, and Tom leaps on with him and nearly falls. And then it turns out that captain's don't like Aes Sedai, they're snakes. And Matt eats all his food and steals all his money with gambling. And very similar to Agni here.
Yeah, he does do that. Agni Neris was a tall, bony man in a dark coat, with ears that stood out and a dour cast to his narrow face. He paid no mind to the sweat rolling down his cheeks. You paid me passage for 2 women. I suppose you want me to take the other wench, and the men for free. Brigida eyed him dangerously, but he seemed not to see. You shall have your fare money, my good captain, Elaine told him coolly. As long as it's reasonable, Nynaeve said, ignored Elaine's sharp glance. Neris's mouth thinned, though it hardly seemed possible, and he addressed Galad again. Then if you'll get your men off my craft, I'll sail. I like being here in daylight now less than ever. As soon as you take your other passengers on, Nynaeve said, nodding to the people huddled ashore. Neris looked for Galad only, to find that he had moved away to speak with the other white cloaks, then eyed the folk ashore, and spoke to the air above Nynaeve's head. Any who can pay, not many in that lot look like they can, and I cannot take the lot if they could. She raised herself on tiptoe, so he could not possibly miss her smile. It snapped his chin down into a collar. Every last one of them, Captain, else I'll shave your ears off for you. The man's mouth opened angrily, then abruptly his eyes widened, staring past her. All right, he said quickly, but I expect some sort of payment, mind. I give alms on first day, and that's long past. Heels settling back to the deck, she looked over her shoulder suspiciously. Tom, Julian, and Uno stood there, blandly watching her and Neris, as blandly as they could manage with Uno's features, and blood all over their faces, far too blandly. With a sharp sniff, she said, I will see them all aboard before anyone touches a rope, and went in search of Galad. She supposed he deserved some thanks. He had thought what he was doing was the right thing. That was the trouble with the best of men. They always thought they were doing the right thing. Still, whatever the 3 had done, they had saved argument. She found him with Elaine, that handsome face painted with frustration. He brightened at the sight of her. Nynaeve, I've paid your way as far as Boanda. That's only halfway to Altara, where the Bourne runs into the Eldar, but I could not afford to pay further. Captain Neris took every copper in my purse, and I had to borrow besides. The fellow charges 10 prices. I'm afraid you'll have to make your own way to Camelin from there. I truly am sorry. You have done quite enough already, Elaine put in, her eyes drifting toward the plumes of smoke rising above Samara. I gave my promise, he said with a weary resignation. Plainly, they had had the same exchange before Nynaeve came. Nynaeve managed to offer her thanks, which he dismissed graciously, but with a look as if she too did not understand, and she was more than ready to admit as much. He started a war to keep a promise. Elaine was right about that. It would be a war, if it was not already, yet, with his men holding Neris's ship, he would not demand a better price. It was Neris's ship, and Neris could charge as he chose, as long as he took Elaine and Nynaeve. It was true. Galad never counted the cost of doing right, not to himself or anyone else. At the gangplank, he paused, staring at the town as if seeing the future. Stay clear of Randall Thor, he said bleakly. He brings destruction. He will break the world again before he is done. Stay clear of him. And he was trotting up to the dock, already calling for his armor. Nynaeve found herself sharing a wondering gaze with Elaine, though it quickly broke up in embarrassment. It was hard to share a moment like that with someone you knew might rake you with her tongue. At least, that was why she felt discomfited. Why Elaine should look flustered, she could not imagine, unless the woman was starting to come to her senses. Surely Galad did not suspect they had no intention of going to Camelin. Surely not. Men were never that perceptive. She and Elaine did not look at one another again for some time.
Sometimes they are that perceptive. Sometimes.
I've got to rewind, though, because while I was reading this, I saw every last one of them, Captain, else I'll shave your ears off for you. The man's mouth opened angrily, then abruptly, his eyes widened, staring past her. All right, he said quickly, but I expect some sort of payment, mind. What was that? He is doing this weird thing where he refuses to acknowledge the women, and he continues to do that through all of his...
I think Tom, Julian, and Uno gave him, like, death threat stares.
They're standing behind Nynaeve, dragging their thumb across her throat or something?
Totally.
Okay. Exactly.
And then as soon as Nynaeve turns around, they're all looking there with completely blank faces. And then, so he's like, oh.
That's true. And she even has a thought, too blank.
Uh-huh.
I thought that might have been our moment where did something...
Some compulsion? No. I think it's just... I literally think it's them standing behind Nynaeve, giving
and you know they're all splattered with blood.
Face. Totally.
Just dripping still.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Like literally blood in Tom's mustache. Like, are you redhead? No, that's blood.
Your blood? Nope.
I mean, I would assume there was some arterial spray when he nearly beheaded the guy.
I can only imagine what happens if you cut the vessels and stuff that are that big and that important. Once when I was a kid, I cut into my palm pretty deeply, by accident, obviously. But I remember the force that the blood was released was amazing. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't have shared that.
I mean, it's called blood pressure for a reason.
I can still remember it. It's just, yeah, it's really under pressure.
Yeah. Dun, 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 dun.
I still have this weird memory of looking down at it and thinking, wow, it's just like the river after a hurricane. And then running to a bathroom and wrapping it in a towel.
Yeah. You know, you should slow the bleeding by putting some ice on it. Some ice, baby.
I remember I wrapped my towel around it. I wrapped a bath towel around it, and I put my hand down, like palm up, on a counter. And I jumped up and put my other hand on that and, like, lifted myself. Thank you, Boy Scouts. Might be alive because of that.
Well, you think your palm you were going to bleed out through your hand?
I mean, it would have taken a long time, but I've never seen blood pour from my body that fast, except for that one time.
Yeah.
Like, lots of scrapes and cuts, you know, all kinds of stuff over the years. But that was the one time I looked down and I was like, holy hell. But I wasn't old enough to have that thought. It looks like the river after it rains a lot.
See, I had the reverse situation when I fell and cut myself, what was it, a couple months ago now? Like, I cut the side of my wrist and I cut deep. I, saw tendons, saw veins, saw fat. There was very little blood. I, clamped my hand down over it. And, and there wasn't really any blood flowing out of, from under my hand or anything. And after about 20 minutes, when I finally got to some place where I could bandage it, I took my hand off and it really wasn't bleeding at that point. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I can see the inside of my wrist and there wasn't really any blood coming out.
Yeah, I remember I'd stopped the bleeding quickly. And my mom was like, why is there blood all over? And I thought it was funny because I was disoriented. I had lost enough blood that I was woozy. This wasn't my wrist. It was like the thumb meat, like the base of the thumb. That's like part of the hand, you know? Cut deep into that. I still have a scar somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
I remember all that very vividly. My mom called an ambulance. The ambulance showed up, and I don't remember going down the stairs, but I remember that they opened the back doors, and the lady that was sitting in the back was a lady that lived up the street who had daughters my age, and she fed me crackers sometimes, in the summer when I was just riding my bike around. It's like, oh, what are you doing here? And she was like, I'm the EMT.
I'm here to help. Yeah, it's weird when EMTs are like, "Oh, you're someone." That's an odd coincidence, but at the same time, she probably, if she's in the community, she probably ends up seeing a lot of people that she knows, and in a lot of ways, it's got to be kind of a nightmare.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's almost kind of adorable. Like, I was just a little boy playing with a pocket knife that I shouldn't have been playing with, probably.
You, Patrick?
That's the kind of thing that... Oh, yeah, sure. I was just being stupid. I was cutting open an apple by stabbing it and sliding the knife around it, and I just slipped. It was a much sharper knife than I was used to handling.
That's why you should always give your kids sharp knives.
People do say
they're
that.
safer. No, yeah, they're much safer.
Also, just teach them how to cut away from themselves. Ugh, Kirsten, me too. Some of my coworkers like to use these tiny little paring knives that won't even go through all the way through a lemon sometimes because they just afraid of the bigger knives, I think, because they just haven't ever handled them. I always go back in the kitchen and go get a bread knife. Cut right through a lemon, one slice. It's easier to control to me. It feels easier to control the larger knife. What were you going to say?
Sorry, I had my dad's leather jacket on, so that's the reason why the only cut is on my wrist and not the rest of my arm.
Oh.
There was a lot of glass, and I fell on my arm, and fortunately the leather jacket protected me.
Yeah.
And it was fine. It didn't have a freaking cut on it. It was great. You know how much I love that jacket, right? Save my arm.
It's a nice jacket.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember when I went out and did social things. Come home from work, shower, get dressed, go out.
Go directly to the bar and sit there with my head in my hands and wait.
Me too. Or I'll go out to a place where people socialize and then I read alone. Which is actually one of my favorite things to do. I'm not saying this is not a sob story.
No, I mean, that's what I do at the bar, is just sit and generally read. I think I might be back on a Dresden Files kick for bar reading, because it's easy bar reading, because it's easy to just plow through, and, you can get distracted for a bit, but it's okay. It's a detective story. You don't really have to know who the bad guy is. He's going to kill him at the end of the story. It's fine.
I feel ya. Lighter reading.
And I can, be drinking, and sometimes when I'm drinking and reading, I forget details later, and that's why I like to reread things at the bar as well.
Yeah, I was kicking myself about that. I'm on The Light That Falls in Lycanus now. I read the first couple of chapters, pretty tips after coming home, and remembered nothing. So I went back and reread all of it.
That's book 3, right?
Yeah, about a quarter of the way through now. It's real long. It's 800 or 900 pages.
Yeah, he was trying to fit a lot into that final book and didn't quite make it with everything, but it's wrapping up a lot of plot lines.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's dense. There are a lot of characters to keep track of now, too.
I'm glad you're reading that. They're fun books.
Yeah, they're good. I noticed N.K. Jemisin came out with something recently. I set that aside for my Kindle to remind me to read that next.
City We Became?
I have it set up so that if she ever does anything, I get a notification. And then I can set that aside, in my list of things to read. I haven't picked it up yet. I'm trying to plow through this other book that I have going first.
Okay, other book news. On the review of Daniel Green, I picked up The Rage of Dragons. What a fucking great book.
Rage of Dragons.
No, it's it was totally a self-published, brand new book, and it's been gotten picked up and widely distributed very recently. So it's an author's first book, The Burning #1 by Evan Winter. I'll just read the description. The Omehi people have been fighting an unwinnable fight for almost 200 years. The society has been built around war and only war. The lucky ones are born gifted. 1 in every 2,000 women has the power to call down dragons. 1 in every 100 man is able to magically transform himself into a bigger, stronger, faster killing machine. And this all takes place during sort of a Bronze Age, African-inspired society, and this was written by a black man. So it's and the voice actor does just a great job. Really, really fun journey following a warrior through society. as he becomes a badass. And it establishes some really, really cool world building that is immensely promising for his later books. There's a bigger bad guy out there. There's a cool magic system. There's a lot of pain and sacrifice and death, and the characters earn all sorts of... The power is so well earned, right? He builds his characters up level by level by level by level, that I love it. It was really well done. It's the voice on the audiobooks is incredibly soothing. I've been listening to it just like, it's almost like the best sleep. Like I've just been, it's so soothing, the voice of the man who's reading it. Kristen, no, the series is not finished. It's a author's first book that just came out. So the story itself, though, is a fairly complete whole. At the end of it, there's definitely a good world and things still need to happen, but you're like, okay, I feel content that was a story. Did you see any of Rafe's AMA on Instagram?
No, I've not been social mediaing very much for the last 2 days. Anything interesting?
If you go to the Watt TV show channel, there's actually a couple of things. Just, confirmation that he's not taking out Min, Elaine, or Avienda, because people have been speculating because they haven't been cast yet. And some of them are in season 1. So a little bit of tidbit about how he's excited about the visualizations of the VX stuff.
I'm excited to see it too.
Probably no trailer for a while. He wants to be green. One of the biggest challenges is the fact that they go to so many locations in the book. Part of what they're having to do is just figure out how to condense the story and move it through fewer locations that they can actually create. He works on a bunch of episodes at once, prepping 2 episodes, shooting 2 episodes, in post on 4, and writing season 2, which I think is the most interesting bit, which confirms that there probably is going to be a season 2. Harriet's involved. Harriet and Maria are both involved and make criticisms, which is great, because we know Maria probably knows more than anyone else living about the series. No timeline on casting announcements because of coronavirus stuff. And most changes to the series are probably going to be related to trying to display inner monologue on screen. And there's just some things you can't do without changing the story, because you don't have that inner monologue.
Sure.
I've been reading The Poppy War. Don't know if you've heard of that one.
No.
I told you about Rage of Dragons, right?
Yeah, I remember you mentioning it.
Where that is basically taking fantasy and telling it from a African-centric point of view, right? As it in the way that Wheel of Time is European-centric.
Sure.
Even though it's not taking place in Europe, the cultures are Europe-based for the most part. Rage of Dragons has sort of a more African Bronze Age style
motif,
technology and motif, even though it's not obviously taking place in Africa. And then Poppy War is very much Chinese-based fantasy. It's taking place in a country that is an analog for China in its medieval period, and the way it fights. But obviously, there's magic and all that kind of stuff. But it's been really interesting to see what essentially amounts to fantasy genres told from other cultures' perspectives, and I feel like that's sort of what I've been diving into now, and I've really been enjoying seeing these stories written by non-white people, is basically what it boils down to. It's fantasy written by non-white people, and it's great. It's great. It's different. It's better. It's I've been so... I've also been reading Lightbringer by Brett Weeks, and I find that to be just so generic white guy fantasy that I'm having trouble. I'm struggling with it. I cannot stick with it. And yet I'm totally intrigued by these other books. They're really sucking me in quickly.
Yeah, it's fun. There's a lot more variety out there than there was in the past.
Anyway, I'm just saying there's some really good fantasy out there that I've been enjoying lately. And if you have time, which I'm assuming most of you do because you're quarantined, Rage of Dragons and The Poppy Wars. And I think The Poppy Wars now has a book 2 out, so I need to go read that.
Popular Wars looks fun. I just read the synopsis in the wiki.
Poppy Wars is great.
Whenever I manage to finish the 3rd book of Lycanus, I have a bunch of suggestions to go on.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?